Hey everybody, my name is Michael. I'm a certified resume writer, and today we are going to go over a software engineering resume, going over some best practices. And if you're also a software engineer or wanting to be a software engineer, maybe you're studying computer science, just like this client here, hopefully you learn a few things about best practices and things to include in your resume, or not include. Let's get started. Okay, so first things first. The client just gave me information about the resume. They weren't actually trying to give me a finished resume, so I'm not going to be too harsh. This is just content dump, and then I kind of repurpose this into a resume. So again, we have important stuff here that I would suggest, like having a LinkedIn, especially if you're applying for those tech roles, and then having a strong LinkedIn presence as well, like having your GitHub projects or GitLab projects hosted on your LinkedIn so recruiters can see that, especially in these tech roles. Recruiters are going to be on LinkedIn, and they will use that to get more information about you. Education listed first. That is the other piece of information that it's interesting to talk about, right? So the only time where I would suggest a client in a resume to have their education listed first is if they are a student, right? Because that is showing that you're still a student, you're still learning. If you have really, really strong experience or the project that you're working on are very notable, then that might be worth putting up. But it's an art, not a science, right? So it depends on the situation. If you're graduating from a very prestigious school over here, then maybe put that up top. If not, and you have a great project, then you can include your projects up top. It just really depends on the situation. So go through that and see what you think makes sense for your own experience and your own resume. Next, we have some of the skills that are mentioned. My whole thing about skills, like I always say, is it's best to have those skills in context of your projects or your experience, right? So we actually have both of that. So there's like, I don't know, Python is a language that's listed here. But if you scroll down, there's also Python listed here as a technology used for this project. So again, I think it's good to have the skills up top just to give you a quick rundown if you're a recruiter to see like, okay, this guy does have Python experience, because the recruiter's not really going to know. Most won't. At least even technical recruiters don't even really know what Python is outside of it's a programming language or how it would be used in what context, right? So it's okay to have somewhat of a keyword dump at the top just to get that, thumbs up from the recruiter. But then when you're talking about how this is going to look to a hiring manager when they view your resume, ideally, if you get past those phone screens, you're going to want to have those technologies listed within your experience to give more focus. So with all that said, we have the project section, which is pretty good. A couple of products that are listed, the technologies that are used within those, which I think is great. And then we have some publications, certificates, and awards, right? The last thing that I will mention here before I go into the finished section is this additional information. So I always tell clients, don't include more demographic information than is strictly required. And this is to prevent unscrupulous employers from discriminating against you. So I would say if you're listing English as your first language, they might think that English isn't your first language, right? Like you had to learn English. And that's a chance to be discriminated against, right? So if you're applying in America, I wouldn't list English as your language. And even listing Chinese as a language, right? They might have some discrimination in that perspective as well. So it's really, really tough. My suggestion is, unless your knowledge of Chinese is imperative to your job, like maybe you're going overseas to go to visit factories and interact with Chinese businessmen, right? Unless that's part of your job, then I wouldn't include this on here. And that's just to make sure there's no discrimination from your resume, right? And there's some that we can't help, right? When we include our name, they can get a picture of who we are, but the minimizing that as much as possible is best, right? So don't include that. I would say don't include things like, hey, I'm married. It's funny, I've seen those in European resumes. Or a photo of you. Definitely do not include that in your resume if you're in America. Things like that. You want to keep things very, very clean. Okay, so that's the old resume. Let's shift into what the new resume looks like and what I provided to the client. And I'll give you some information on that. So first things first, kind of the first thing that I focused on was the title here. So you'll see there's a backend software developer title, which I think is really important. This is the first thing that the recruiter is going to see. And especially if you are applying for back-end software development roles, they're going to say, oh, cool. We're applying, we're looking for a software developer back-end, and this person has that exact title. And you can change this for every role that you're applying for. But it's just a really quick way for them to kind of mentally match you up with that position. I included like the basics of contact information here, like the phone number, email. There's a GitHub link, which I think is really important, and then a LinkedIn section. And then we have a professional profile, which really tells a story of their professional career. Now, like they're new to the software development world and the computer science world, but they're going into their student experience and how there's two specific degrees, computer science and philosophy, merge together and make them a certain specific unique candidate for this role, right? And that's another thing that I talk about as well to all my clients is what is your unique niche? What can you bring to this company that is unique and about you, right? Because if you're just a generic, again, this might be enough, but if you're a generic computer science graduate, what is it that makes you different? Is it the school that you graduated from? Is it the fact that you have, two majors, one in philosophy, one in computer science? Is it the fact that you were a history major, right? And then how do you explain that in your summary? Like how does history or a history major, how does that help you be a better employee or a better computer scientist? Same thing with philosophy, whatever you name it, right? How do you weave that story into your resume? And you want to make sure that it makes sense and that's cohesive, right? And that's the part of storytelling, because what you want the recruiter to see is like, oh, wow, it's natural that this person should work here. And it's amazing how their love of philosophy and this critical thinking skills they picked up from philosophy and, talk about recursion and all that kind of stuff fits into this computer science mindset, right? You want to create a story with your resume, and the ending of that story, the conclusion of that story, or maybe the next chapter is you as the candidate working for their company. So think really hard on that. Okay. So we actually ended up including the projects as the first things being highlighted because this client had really, really strong projects. Education is listed here on the left so the recruiter can see everything in one page. And this goes back to like this whole idea of one-page resumes. You want to fit the most important information on the first page. And really the second page, most people aren't going to get to. And I'll be honest with you, if you're a recruiter, you're probably getting realistically maybe about to here in the resume before you stop reading. So you probably will see this as well. Maybe you'll stop here and then you're glancing over, then you're done, right? Especially in today's age with AI, recruiters do not have the time to scan all these resumes. I don't know what the future is going to hold with AI-generated resumes and AI-generated ATS systems and recruiting systems. It's insanity. And that's why it's important, number one, to have a really short resume. So they are being flooded with these AI resumes. They can quickly, as a recruiter, view this. But it's also important, and this is kind of a tangent, right, to think about how you as a candidate can build value outside of just a resume, right? And this is where it comes into being, how are you networking? Are you talking to other people who are in the same roles? Are you talking to other professionals? Are you going to conferences, right? Are you creating content on LinkedIn? Are you sharing with other developers, right? I think we're going to see a shift majorly into this human-to-human face interaction because resumes are too easily AI generated, and that's going to have an impact on just your text resume. But for now, we're okay. We can still talk about resumes. Few other things that I wanted to mention here. So we included some relevant courses. These are important to the client. And I think if you are still a graduate or you're in graduate school, you're getting your master's, your bachelor's, and you're applying for internships, definitely include relevant courses that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. So I would highly recommend doing that. We rewrote all of their projects to be a little bit more clean. And then we also included a results section. You'll see that right here and here that talks about the kind of gain of the project that they made, right? So developed a NeoVim plugin using Lua and NVim API, blah, blah. But what was the result of that? And again, this is a huge thing I talk about And this is talking like the STAR method, right? We talk about recruiting or interviewing and resumes. Like, what is the result of what you did or your time at that company? A resume is not just a listing of responsibilities. That's a job description. Your resume is the highlight reel. It's the 2 or 3 minute trailer that gets you hooked into the candidate, right? And that's why I like the movie trailer example, because a movie trailer is a 2-minute example and it has a storyline and it has a hook to get you into it. So you want to make sure that you have a hook, right? So anyways, back to this. Having results is really important because the recruiter can see this and say, hey, this is the information and results that this candidate can provide to my company. They can imagine you in that role. So that's why I included that. We had some certificates here that were included. And then I also added basically experience. So if they get professional experience, they can add this. This is just a template for the candidate, but they wanted me to include that in the future. I did remove the English language here, like I mentioned before, and just included Chinese because they did mention they would be interacting, I think, in another Chinese area, right? So that's why that's included there. But that's a quick summary of the software development intern resume. Please let me know if you have any questions. If you have a resume that you yourself would like feedback on, I'd be happy to do an episode, even chat with you to career coaching. I'm happy to help. Please let me know what you think. But if not, I will see y'all later.